那接下来呢，我们将邀请赛诺菲中国区总裁贺恩婷带来主题演讲。我们离新冠疫苗还有多远 ？So let's welcome Dr. Pius。请导播将信号给到主嘉宾。OK， 贺恩婷，非常感谢贺恩婷教授今天会给我们做一个分享。然后呢，现在他正在连接信号，我们的导播正在争取快速的和他连接。Hi.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Hey.
Welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, true pleasure to be able to speak to you all at this very Sunday morning here in Shanghai. I understand that COVID-19 leads to an unprecedented success also of the GMIC. Here you have more than a couple of millions people connected. So I assume that the confinement also allows people to really participate, the whole time to the conference. Very interesting discussion before of Jen and Lucas. My presentation will be a bit more lighter, so I'm not a deep IA expert. But before I start, I would like to first express my thanks to all the healthcare professionals here in China, the healthcare professionals around the world who really dedicate each and every moment of their lives to make us safer, to treat us, and also to take risk in this very specific moment of the pandemic. So my wishes go to them, and I would like to thank them for the relentless efforts. And I do so also for the employees of Sanofi all around the world. So thanks for listening. So next slide, please. So obviously we have seen before that everything is about innovation, and it starts and it ends with innovation. The ability of mankind to innovate is at the core of advancement and future prosperity. So this has been true for the last couple of 100,000 years. When the first women and men discovered the fire, it has started with when people settled down and really discovered agriculture as a way of improving health and life expectancy already then, and then it went to printing, electricity, automobile, and so forth. 2007, we had a big breakthrough with the iPhone, helping us to really access at the fingertip abundant information. Now we see, as the discussion of Dr. Jen and Lucas showed, is that AI is really emerging of the last 5 to 6 years. So it's all about innovation. And throughout that course of history, there are basically two parts of human headcount and beliefs, which are linked to, can we overcome the challenges of the future? It's linked with technology, but it's also linked with healthcare. And there was a fellow, which was called Thomas Malthus, in the 1766 born, who actually believed then, in 1766, early 19th century, he believed that the end is near. The end is near because the world at that time point had 1 billion people on the planet, and he defended the theory that we will not have enough food, not enough space for people to survive the next couple of 50, 60 years. We all know today, where we're approaching and have surpassed the 8 billion people, that this obviously was not true. On the other hand, you have the cornucopians, which are those who believe that actually innovation and science will help us to completely disrupt previous beliefs and to overcome any challenge we will face. And I think it's a very specific moment also now today, and probably we speak afterwards about it, how we overcome the challenge of COVID-19. And that theory actually was very illustrative, demonstrated by two economists in the 1980s, which was Julian Simon and Paul Ehrlich, who did a bet in the 80s about rare metals and the prices, because they said, as economists, if something becomes very rare, it becomes so rare, it becomes so expensive, that it becomes a barrier for innovation. And they made a bet for 5 metals in the 1980s over 10 years. And Paul Ehrlich bet that they become extremely expensive because they will be so rare that nobody can buy them. And Julian Simon said, no, actually, I believe that science will tell us, innovation will tell us that probably they are not anymore so important, actually the prices will go down as an indicator for the rareness of these metals. And obviously it was Julian Simon who won that bet, that epic bet, because all 5 rare metals actually were traded afterwards in the 1990s at a much lower price as we could have imagined in the 1980s. So it's a bit linked to a topic which I will refer later to on. And I think we see something also with the oil price, because we all remember in the 70s that we thought the oil price will go through the roof and will be not affordable anymore. And now with the COVID-19 experience, we see that we can even see negative oil prices throughout the world in specific situations. So now let's go to the next slide. Obviously, innovation at its core, and it goes every day much faster, which is quite interesting. And I think we're all challenged by the speed of innovation and how we digest it. Since only the last 20 years, and many of the people who are now listening to us might even not remember any of these logos of these companies, because 50%, actually more than 50% of the Fortune 500 companies, and some of them you see on the screen, have completely disappeared and are replaced by new entrepreneurs, new companies. And many of these companies who have disrupted other companies actually also have already disappeared. So we see the rejuvenation of innovation and new access models is just incredible, sometimes beyond imagination. And that's at the core of the challenge of large multinationals like Sanofi and other companies to continue to innovate at a pace which is faster and faster. There's another challenge we're going to face, and Lucas and Jen talked about it. It's obviously, next slide please, is that in the next 5, 6, 7 years, actually the World Economic Forum estimates that more than 52%, probably it's now around 60%, will actually be performed by robots and not by humans anymore. This starts first with low added value tasks, obviously, but it penetrates more and more into more sophisticated tasks in the day-to-day. Probably not the first thing, as we heard about the discussion before, of primary school teachers, probably not primary school at first, but there will be other jobs which we certainly will be disrupted in the next 5 to 6 years. And this, as such, will bear a challenge, because nobody knows today how fast new jobs will emerge versus the jobs will disappear. But what we know, that's the next slide, is that obviously many new jobs are created as we speak. We have seen that in healthcare. We are more and more talking about real world evidence. We have scientists only working at real world evidence. We have people who manage not only social media, but also are directly in contact with people and patients throughout the internet. So we will see a good emergence of new jobs. The question is, which is the dynamic of both appearance and disappearance of new jobs? So next slide, please. One of the universities which deals a lot with disruption and new technologies is Singularity in California. And Peter Diamandis of the Singularity University actually is speaking of this circle of the six big Ds. The 6 Ds, starting with digitalization, meaning that everything which we touch is about to be digitized step by step. And we see that also now in pharma. The second step, which we see, and it's called deception, because sometimes we believe it takes a huge amount of time. So we're really at the bottom of that curve before exponential growth. It's again, we can very much, compare it to COVID-19. We have seen the first, the second, the third patients, and people around the world didn't believe that it could really, become exponential. And you see that also in the digital world. At the beginning, it goes very slowly, but once you reach the tipping point, it really leads to the disruption we see after this deception phase. The next D is, once it has penetrated, once it's at scale, we see that actually costs are going the other direction, meaning that for any incremental service we provide, for any incremental unit we are able to sell or to put at place, the costs are going to zero. And with that, we also see another phenomenon is that we see the completely dematerialization of the digital world. So before we were trading goods and physical appearances. Today, and I'm already a bit more advanced in age. I used to have vinyl discs. I used to have cassette recorder. I used to have a Walkman. I used to have CDs, and many of you obviously don't even remember anymore what it means. So, and we see it now in healthcare. We see it in music industry. We see it in the video industry, but we see it also in who buys today is still a map. Huh? Everybody is either on Google, on Baidu Map, on Google Map, or an Apple Map, but nobody will buy today anymore a map. And then ultimately, as these services become abundant, accessible, we really see a democratization in the sense that not only the early adapters who are ready to pay a big price, not only the governments, not only the big corporations, but ultimately everybody will be able to leverage these services because they are virtually costing nothing. So we see abundant democratization of things in the world of today. First is education. Today virtually you don't need to go to a big school. You actually are able to acquire your knowledge through massive online courses at the same quality as many universities offer in brick and mortar. So now, what about healthcare? So let's look a bit at what happened. Next slide. In the last 200 years about healthcare. Sanofi is a large pharmaceutical company, and one of our branches actually is called Sanofi Pasteur. Now, why? Because in the 1800s, 1900s, in 1880s, Louis Pasteur was the first person who actually were able to invent the vaccines. Now we talk a lot about vaccines nowadays, and the first vaccine was invented in 1985, 1986 against rabies. It was the first moment where mankind was able to prevent future diseases. It's quite interesting. And then in the 1929s, we had another fellow who was called Alexander Fleming, who invented the first antibiotic, which was penicillin, which was a breakthrough invention because you see that actually from the 20s, you see life expectancy dramatically improve over time over the last 120 years. While it has been in the 1900s only 45 to 48 years, in the 60s, it has already been close to 75, 74 years. And nowadays, there are countries who have a life expectancy in average, which is well beyond 85 years. And if you happen, to give birth to a child this year or the last year, you can be certain that your child will have a life expectancy of more than 100 years, definitely, if hopefully he or she will not have an accident or will die of cancer. And the funny thing about the whole life expectancy projection is that once you achieved 80, you don't have a life expectancy of 83, 84 anymore. You actually will have a life expectancy of above 90. So with every life year gained, you're going to be able to gain additional years, statistically speaking, of your life. And that's very interesting. It has only been able through innovation in healthcare and in nutrition and in well-being. So coming to the next slide is really that, what is the connection with digital? Obviously, digital access to information in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, because it really started with the access of smart devices in healthcare. So it actually really started from the 2010s on, not before, because before we needed to use desktop computers. Today, we have each physician has access on his mobile device to abundant information, to have accurate diagnosis tools, accurate literature, to quickly process new information and to give best standard of care. And now, coming to what are the key transformation areas we see actually in healthcare. There are actually 7 of them. And the impressive things is there are not 7 by its own, but it's 7 happening actually at the same time. So the parallelity of things happening is actually giving the speed and the disruption of the entire ecosystem. Obviously, cloud computing is at its core, so meaning that we really are able to access information, to connect information much more easily across ecosystems, to really look at them as a total, and really to be able then to process big data. For that, we need really be data accessible abundantly from different locations, from different ecosystems into each other. So demographic data, healthcare data, physician treatment data, patient data, in China, coming from the hospital, coming from the patients, coming from the government, will allow us to really see new things in healthcare. The second thing is obviously IoT with wearables. Today we can perform clinical trials at large scales, meaning with millions of patients, through a wristband, through a watch, and really look how patients are behaving in different situations. We can detect, suicidal people linked to their biological parameters, heartbeat, and so forth. We are able to detect heart attacks. We are able to detect people who do not feel well. The third, obviously, is and our colleagues have talked about it, is AI, which is at the core. Meaning, how can you really learn and automate certain things which human beings would like to do, but through a supported AI to really connect the data and have the right diagnostics, the right conclusions about how we apply solutions to the diagnostics. The fourth is really about robotics. So robotics, nanorobotics. Da Vinci is one of the big tools today. Every brain surgeon or cardiac surgeon is using. It's allowing us to penetrate the human body with unprecedented accuracy, minimal invasion, and really do things which we have never thought we could do. And then obviously we have nanotechnology, also in medicines, which allow printable tattoos, which allow to interact with the skin and deliver therapies through the skin through nanotechnologies. And last but not least, emerging really in the last couple of years, is the personalized genomics. We see that with the fact that sequences, genomes becoming virtually, very cheap. A couple of years back, it was a couple of $1,000s. Today, you can do that for a few dollars already, which allows us really to sequence genomes much faster and to start to develop personalized therapies linked to genetic diseases of patients. So the emergence of these 7 key transformational things are really making that science will further improve, and we are very confident that healthcare will continue to advance, and there is no limit to further improvement. Then there is obviously coming more and more is the quantum revolution, which allows us to even more treat and calculate big data. I'm not a specialist, but if you want to really start to go into drug discovery, designing new molecules for treating diseases, more and more we need very powerful computer power in order to be able to calculate the models and to design new therapies before we go into clinical trials. And so what we do at Sanofi, we're really working on 4 pillars. Next slide, please. Is first of all is the digital engine. We call it digital engine, or we put data at its core, meaning that everything starts in data, even in healthcare, even in a pharmaceutical company. Be it in R&D, where we need to pool population data from clinical trials or from real-world evidence, from observing population using interventional drug therapies. Second is really the digital enterprise, is how do we as a company interact with customers, healthcare professionals, and patients. So it's more of how we interact. The third is really about going beyond product innovation. Product innovation is at our core. It's our key competence, and we invest every year, billions of dollars in drug discovery. But it's also thinking about how we can design digital therapeutics that can be drug plus, meaning a drug plus a technology intervention on top of the drug to improve adherence, or that can be really pure digital therapeutics. There are products already approved in some markets, which, for example, help us to treat depression for people with psychological disorders, which are purely digital solutions and which are going to be reimbursed in the future to help people to feel better. And then obviously the digital enablers is really the way we work as a company, the way we are able to make sure that our employees are able to progress, to learn and to adapt to a new ecosystem. So one of the things is, for example, we try to improve the technology quotient or digital quotient of our workforce, specifically here in China, because we want to do that change and to embrace that technology always with our employees. So we're really working on these four pillars. Pharma today is still, I would say, a bit lagging behind of other industries, but we realize more and more, and specifically here in China, that the next wave of innovation in the next 5 to 10 years, not in 20 years, the next 5 to 10 years, will be extremely critical. So we are very much engaged to connect with the different ecosystems, be it in technology companies, but also in brick and mortar hospitals, to find the best solution to advance care in China and around the world. Thanks a lot for listening.
Okay, thank you for your sharing. 感谢您的分享。我们也期待疫苗可以快快到达我们的身边。